Hi, and welcome to MGAC Inner Voices, a podcast digging into the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion in the architecture, engineering, construction community. I want to preface this podcast by letting everyone know that we're not experts in all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm here with our guests to share their stories, our stories, and discuss how together we can create a better outcome for all of us in the AAC industry. And I'm Bryan Gamez, a project manager at MGAC, working and living in Los Angeles. And today I have a special guest with me, Miss Priscilla Chavez. Thank you so much for being with us today, Priscilla. Do you want to give an introduction of yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So first, thank you so much, Bryan and MGAC, for the opportunity to connect and storytell, because I think that's what today is about, right? Storytelling. And super honored that we're raising the profile of the voices of present leaders in Los Angeles and other places. And very excited about the chat today. I'm Priscilla. I lead business development for PCL Construction in Los Angeles. And I think the one thing I want everyone to know is I'm a native Angelino. So that's going to inform
Yes.
every part of our conversation today.
I am so happy to have you on the podcast, Priscilla. My colleague Nick connected us and said that you would be perfect for this. And I'm just so happy that we're going to have this conversation to really cast a lens on women in the industry and Latina women. I want to dive into it. So I want to know where you're from. I want to give our audience just a taste of who you are as a person.
Born and raised in Highland Park before it was cool. I was just there a couple of weeks ago and I'm like, how is Highland Park getting a Lilabo? I don't understand. So,
That's
and I
funny.
think got deemed one of the most, I think it's like one of the most hippest cities in the country now, like after Echo Park and stuff. We're like crazy. Certainly that was not the case when I was growing up. So spent the majority of my youth there, went to high school there, middle school, elementary school there. And our family then moved to Pasadena, but most of my family has been in the city, in the county forever, my whole entire life. I do come from immigrant parents. My dad is from Nicaragua, and my mom is a mix between Honduran and Salvadoran. So Central American is how I describe sort of my ethnic roots.
I love that because you and I are very similar. My family's from Central America too, Guatemala. One thing that I learned about you in our pre-interview was that your professional journey did not begin in construction. I want to know what drove you into construction. Can you take us through how you got into construction?
It's so interesting because not just because it's my story, but when I talk to people about their path for construction, because I'm always curious about how they landed in construction, I would say 50-50 is people who just accidentally landed in AEC, architecture, engineering, construction. But for me, I was working at a law firm in Beverly Hills, actually around this time, which by the way is one of the most beautiful places you could be at during the holidays. So as a young 19, 20-year-old, I'm like, this is amazing. I've made it. Except my commute sucked. I was like, this is kind of cool. I'm a block from Rodeo Drive. This is awesome. That drive was actually pretty horrific from Pasadena to Beverly Hills on a daily
Yeah.
commute. So I started applying through Craigslist. This is before it was all spam. I'm going to date myself here, but almost 20 years ago, which is wild that I can say that almost 20 years ago. Applied through Craigslist at a bunch of different places. One of the companies I applied for was hiring for an admin assistant. This is a government relations, community outreach focused firm. I ended up interviewing with the owner of the company, a woman, Diane Castano Sali, and I remember walking into that office. So let me take a pause here. I decided not to go to college.
Yes.
Institutional classroom learning I knew was not for me. I had taken a couple of college classes while I was in high school, but between that and some family obligations, I just went straight into the workforce. But I was working at this law firm and that was awesome. And that came through a connection through church. And I would later,
Oh, that's
Bryan,
cool.
actually get to honor the importance and the value of our network. I didn't know it at the time, but now in my career, I'm like, man, it's truly not just about who you know, but the depth of those relationships. You
Mm.
mentioned Nick. That's why I'm here, right?
Yep.
Nick brought my name up. It's all about what people say about you when you're not in the room. Talking about rooms, I walked into this room with Diane And the first photo I saw was the former city attorney, Rocky Delgadillo. So I highlighted, I said, oh, that's Rocky. I said, by the way, I'm Priscilla, but I know that guy. And her eyes just lit up and she said, do you know him? I said, actually, I do, because he graduated from my high school, Highland Park, Franklin High School, go Panthers. And he went on to go to Harvard and was like that really amazing story coming from sort of marginalized, underrepresented community to now Harvard and served as the city attorney for Los Angeles.
Mhm.
I said, and I did campaigning for him when I was in high school, knocking door to door when he was running for his city attorney campaign. And through her lit up eyes, she said, well, he's like my son. She then went on to explain that she had worked for the city for about 40 years. She had been an advocate for minority businesses
It's
throughout
cool.
her, second part of her career there, and was really focused on economic development through construction projects. So she highlighted like the Northridge earthquake, the Alameda corridor, these really major milestone projects that were getting built in the city in a time that really there was an economic downturn. And so even though she wasn't a construction business, she orbited construction by supporting and helping small minority diverse owned businesses really access public contracting dollars.
Yeah. That's honestly, it kind of just hit me now. How cool is it, you beginning in your career, that you were able to meet Diane and get your feet wet with her and just be brought under her wings? She sounds like an incredible person to have met at that time. And this was through
Absolutely.
Craigslist, right?
Yeah, and she's still incredible. I didn't know, right? I mean, I think when I learned about what she was doing through her and my experience with her firm, like I fell in love with the built environment. I mean, how often do we just pause
Yeah.
and take in, right?
Yep.
And I'm not just talking about architecture, but how urban planning works and
Yep.
why things are where they're at, right? And so it was really great to just be able to admire the built environment, the communities where we live, work, and play. And absolutely working with Diane, I mean, she helped me understand the delicate balance between, obviously like built environment, profitable earnings through the work that we do now in construction, obviously here at PCL, but also the social responsibility. And this was before that was even a term, right? I mean, I'm talking about almost 20 years ago.
Early
There was no
2000s.
term
Yeah.
as diversity inclusion, right? It was affirmative action. It was about community benefits. It was about how can we help inform community that looks like us to access the dollars that we either voted for or just don't do better because we don't know any better. So
Mhm.
certainly she awakened, I would say, the advocate in me and what that really has created for my life and career moving forward. I mean, forever grateful.
And she still leaves a lasting legacy on you today.
100%. It's about paying it forward, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what the definition of legacy is off the top of my head, but it's about, again, what we get to leave behind, right? And what we get to pay forward. And so I have no idea if she'll listen to this podcast, but certainly people that know her might listen to this. And I wish to make her proud, right? Because she made
I
an
think she would be
investment in
proud.
me, right? She made an investment. She decided, hey, this person's worth the investment. And I think that's something that I want to do and pay forward to the people that surround me. I've tried to do that. And I think that's how we, maybe an Easter egg moment, but that's how we actually continue to shift the faces of our industry, paying it forward.
And that's interesting you say that, because that was kind of leading into my next question. It sounds to me that she helped reframe your perspective about helping others, right? You talk about paying it forward. How has that helped reframe your perspective about construction and people in construction or jumping into construction? And how do you help them now? Because we had talked about how she had this net of connections, a network, but between herself and GCs, and made herself to be a bridge, right? And how has that affected you today?
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate you bringing that up. In my upbringing, my parents, I just remember them bringing people through the house, right? Whether they were missionaries, people visiting from other countries, we always hosted people. And my parents have always been incredibly giving. I mean, that's just the household I grew up in. So I didn't know, Bryan, that through my career, that those elements and qualities observed, because I had seen it modeled, could actually be a differentiator, right? So
Yeah.
I meet Diane and I'm like, whoa, like this servant leadership is something she has made a career out of, right? She's advocating for others, and therefore, as a leader, also raising her influence by advocacy. And so I did get to learn from her and observe her. I noticed how she could call the mayor and call elected officials and really rainmakers in Los Angeles, and they would all not just take her call, but rise to the ask or the need that she had. And as a young professional, I remember thinking, I want that. How do I become that person that is relied upon, is trusted? I need to deliver, because in order for me to be helpful to others, I think I need to be a master of my craft, right?
Yeah.
I need to be excellent so that others can trust any advisement, that I give, right? Any
Yeah.
suggestions that I give. And so through her, I got to do that for businesses specifically. For lack of a better word, I was really an extension of their business development efforts. So I then became that bridge that she was for those businesses between large contractors and small contractors. And coming to PCL, that absolutely informed how I wanted to show up for community, but also for PCL. And in fact, I remember telling my leader at the time, Jack Sample, who now leads our Eastern region, I said, you hiring me for PCL is not, there's no learning curve. I'm already in community. In order for me to be a bridge, I have to be able to know both stakeholders, right? Both, in this case, PCL's initiatives and imperatives and the small business community who we were trying to serve. And I said, I'm already in that community. So this is just the shift of hats. I've been wearing the Diane hat. Now I get to trade it for that green and gold PCL hat, right? And so what I've tried to do is really be a liaison, and often don't coin myself as a sponge. In fact, I love to say that I'm a conduit. So as I
Yeah.
learn, I want to very
Pass it through.
quickly pass it forward.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting as I listen to you, did it ever dawn on you that because she was a woman, that she had to work harder in the space, or that didn't even cross your mind path at all? It was, I am going to work as hard as I can because people respect her. Like, did that ever just cross your mind?
No, it didn't. I mean, I remember giving her accolades. I have an email I shot her after we interviewed, and I said it would be incredible to work for a woman-owned business, right? I've been raised by incredible women, between my mom, my tia, my abuela who's still alive, right? Like these are all alpha females. Like so they're all incredible. Working for a woman, I was like, of course, that makes sense. I never at that time didn't think for a second that there aren't that many. It wasn't a thought that crossed my mind. However, working with her, I would later learn that perhaps some of her traumatic experiences or her lived experiences, she would actually try to, in her pursuit of warning me, I think there would be a little bit of sort of caution that maybe was trauma informed caution. So, for
Mm.
example, I remember the first time I became aware that I was a young woman and perhaps attractive was a moment I was talking to a general contractor and we were setting up lunch. And I was like, oh my, this is awesome, right? Like this is a new relationship I get to build a bridge with.
Yeah.
And I remember she intersected that relationship and said, not only is she cute, but she's smart too. And I just remember like
Oh,
being so
interesting.
confused by her comment because I'm like, why are we talking about this? Like I was on my
Yeah.
way to set up lunch. Just that my looks or what I look
Right.
like just
Right.
had irrelevant. But I remember just that throwing me completely off. And I would later, I think, learn with her that, oh, she learned to use all the tools in her toolbox.
Yeah.
Right. And as a woman, I remember her telling me, I haven't always looked like this in her late 60s. Right. And she still had her eyelashes and her acrylics on. But that was the first time I realized, oh, okay, there actually is an opportunity. I am a woman and I am going to be identified as a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm a young woman at that. And so that's going to inform how people relate to me. And so I get to decide how I want to be related to and how I choose to show up in a room.
It empowered you.
It
Would you say
did,
that?
and
Or
also it didn't.
it almost sounds like she was using, like you said, her toolbox to make you aware of the resources available to you for your future relationships. I don't know if that's empowerment or if that's awareness, but I think it's a vehicle to that did help you. Is that true?
Looking back, 100%.
Hmm.
But at the time, I didn't have the maturity to discern that. So because I'm
Interesting.
still on my journey of becoming,
Yeah.
right? I was
Yeah.
20, 21 years old. Even though maybe that should have empowered me, what it actually did was that made me second guess myself. I'm like, are people looking at me and just taking lunch
Did
because
she?
I'm young or cute? Because I want to make sure that they're taking lunch because I'm smart. Because I
Yeah,
was
I
trying
get it.
to, maybe the imposter syndrome, which now we have a term for that. Because
Yeah.
remember, I didn't go to college, I don't come from a corporate family. And so I'm trying to sort of make space for myself in
Yeah.
these really corporate environments. And I will say it was short lived. I wasn't in that mindset for too long, but it was something that I was aware of. And I don't think that was something she intended. And we never talked about it. But certainly later, oh, absolutely. I'm like, use all the tools in my toolbox, 100%. We should all do that.
You talked about, jumping into PCL. What specifically got you into PCL and to your seat that you are today?
Great question. So I came to PCL. So I was with Diane for about 9 years at a retirement party with a couple of clients, including Turner Construction and my good friend Michelle Ballard, who's now retired. She approached me, and she was a client at the time. We were consulting to Turner through Diane's business and doing really great work, helping community and so forth. And Michelle says, "Hey, I want you to go talk to PCL." And I'm like, "Ooh, great. Are they looking for a consultant? Because I'm in, right? Put me in, coach. I'm ready." And she goes, "Maybe, but I actually think they're looking for someone that can be in house." She said, "My good friend, again, Jack, who I would later interview with, they had worked together during the construction of LA Live. She was at AEG at the time. And
Okay.
so PCL built LA Live, and that's how they met. She said, "My friend Jack is looking for someone that can come help them build an economic development program that can support small businesses and really meet some of these contractual obligations with these new contracts PCL has," which was almost in excess of $2 billion. And I remember telling Michelle, I'm not really interested in talking to PCL. I don't really see them out with community, and I don't see them show up at the career fairs and the supplier diversity fair. She says, "Prissy," which is what she calls me. She's like, "That's exactly the reason why you should go talk to them." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you're my mentor.
Interesting.
I trust you, so I'll go and talk to them." And I certainly did. And when I met with Jack, I remember him saying, "Listen, we don't know what this role is supposed to do. We don't know where you get started, what you're supposed to do in terms of like activities, but we know we need the role because yeah, we do have these contractual obligations." This is really what sealed it for me. He said, "You can come build whatever you want. Not even sky's the limit." And at the time, I just remember like my vision board completely exploding. Okay, I didn't plan for this. I thought my path was going to be being mentored by Diane. I've moved on from being an admin assistant to now really leading the office and drumming up new business. I'm like, this is my life. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Look at me, mom, right? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And now this general contractor has an opportunity that feels like could be really incredible. I had observed and I had consulted to many general contractors during my 9 years with Diane. So I had observed best practices, lessons learned. And of course, well, if I were in the seat, right? Lots of those moments. And so what Jack was offering on behalf of PCL was, "Hey, what would it look like if you were in the seat?" Which, by the way, there is no seat. We could actually create whatever you want. And so it would be about a month, of interviews and so forth, and hard conversations between Diane and broken dreams, because I learned that I wasn't necessarily going to succeed the company. And Diane's no would actually lead to my yes at PCL. And so observing that sometimes, a closed door can be traumatic and could
Right.
be disheartening and disappointing, but it can also push you into an open door that you would not
Yeah.
otherwise take. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. I said yes to PCL, started here January 2016. and came to be the diversity and inclusion manager at PCL, and got to really work with the most incredible builders, incredible leaders. And here's the thing, Bryan, as difficult as I thought it was going to be to come in as the new and create new practices, I am so appreciative to PCL for the opportunity and for listening. Together, we had no idea what could be possible in terms of community relations, economic development, and impact. But together, we created some really amazing, amazing outcomes that represent the communities where we live, work, and play. And that was
That's
really
amazing.
my first half of a career at PCL. And then there's the second half, which is the role you see me in today, business development.
What was it like being the diversity and inclusion manager? And do you have much more of a hybrid role now? And because you are business development too. And what were some of those achievements that you talked about? Because right now, I think the country is facing a little bit of a what's going to happen to these programs type of moment. And
Sure.
so I want to know, like, what would, in your experience, in your role, what did you guys do? What would you like to see happen? And where do you see that this kind of going, and especially with your role?
I will try to answer. There's several parts that I think are so important about your questions. I would say coming in as manager diversity and inclusion, it was great because I remember telling Jack, he asked me, what are you going to do when team members are not necessarily supporting the effort? And I said, well, I'm going to look to you, Jack. You're the executive. There has to be executive buy-in into your vision
Yeah,
in order for me to
agreed.
come, right? Your job is to lead the effort, and to persuade, I'm happy to do that. To influence, I can do that, but I need your executive buy-in. And I think that's really important in any initiative, whether it's diversity, inclusion, technology, sustainability, any type of practice that is new. I think executive buy-in is ultra important. You can't just talk about it, you have to be about it. And so I'm
Yeah.
grateful that Jack was about it. And not just that, he put his money where his mouth was in terms of hiring me, giving me a budget. Some of the early accomplishments I remember was we were successful with winning a project at Kaiser Permanente. We had been interviewing with Kaiser and had gotten work with Kaiser, maybe not in excess of $10 million, but now they had this really beautiful school of medicine that they wanted to build in Pasadena, one of a kind. And talk about these relationships. The person leading diversity and inclusion at Kaiser Permanente had become my best friend because I had consulted to him at Swinnerton Construction. And so he's
Oh,
now leading that effort. I remember I called him and I said, Steve, I said, we're going to interview for Kaiser School of Medicine. This is up our alley, intersection of medical office buildings, but also higher ed. Should I be in the room? I'm diversity and inclusion now. He said, absolutely. He's like, all your competition will have your counterparts in the room. So I remember pulling at Jack 2 months after I got hired. I said, hey, Jack, I know I'm new. I'm the new kid on the block, but I need to be in this interview. And Jack goes, well, why? I'm like, well, Hansel Phelps is going to have my counterpart there. I said, I know the diversity and inclusion manager at Kaiser. He'll be in the room. Oh, by the way, Jack, I forgot to tell you, I actually consulted to Kaiser for the high desert medical office building that they built with McCarthy. They were my client. I said, so I'm going to go in the room and I'm going to shake some hands, and no babies there to kiss, but I'm going to shake hands and just create familiarity. And he said, yes. And then we won the project. And one of the
yay.
reasons, listen, true or false, one of the reasons they said we won the project was because of our approach to diversity and inclusion. And it was like the first major win. And I'm
I
so
love that.
grateful because Jack was like,
This,
this actually could be a good
yeah.
investment. And wait, this was the part that would inform my diversity and inclusion career at PCL. It can affect how we make money,
Right
how
there.
the bottom line.
Business. Yeah.
And so you asked about what it was like. I mean, I had the most supportive leaders. And I think what I learned for myself was I needed to inform. People don't know better, so they don't do better. I still believe that to this day. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that people didn't see me as just someone who was raising the white diversity and inclusion flag, drumming up the tables and saying, hey, we need to do diversity because there's diverse businesses out there. No, actually, this is absolutely connected to the bottom line. And I'm not trying to disrupt business as much as you think I am. We're a
Yeah.
100-year-old plus company. We've done a lot of things right, but I'm really here to help augment and enhance our efforts. What if We could do all of our normal business practices with subcontractors, subconsultants. And what if we could also do this thing over here too?
Mm-hmm.
And what if that created additional results that we could then carry forward to new clients like LAX, to new clients like LA Community College District, to new clients, including private clients. And what we got to see was we started tracking dollars spent with diverse businesses. We got to see new careers started with underrepresented groups, including minorities, women, folks that had been formerly incarcerated. They were getting their construction start on PCL projects. And you know what? We loved it because it didn't cost us anything. All we were doing was creating equitable access to opportunity. We would do our normal outreach, our normal casting the nets to career fairs. We were also doing the career community fairs, and we were finding diamonds. I remember telling our team, what has that cost us? Just a yes to an equitable access. And what we saw were that people were seizing those opportunities and creating our business better, because those are now proofs that we get to pay forward. In my current role, no, it's not hybrid. It's completely business development.
Oh,
but I also, that experience and my experience with Diane and my experience doing that campaigning in high school and the experience of seeing my parents host, everything I've seen in my life has informed how I do business today. And so, yes, I am responsible for identifying opportunities that are prime for PCL Construction, but the lens I get to do that through and how that is informed is by everything I have learned, everything people have imparted into me, experience, best practices. And it's great. I'm having lots of fun, having meaningful discussions. And I think I will wrap up the answer to your question in terms of, right now it feels like it's a volatile time. I would say it's always been a volatile time, right? I mean, I think, since these programs started in the 1960s, the reason why affirmative action program started was because folks got frustrated with the way that business was going and they resisted the status quo. And I think that for anyone who's listening and is looking to just create something new and innovate, it doesn't have to be diversity and inclusion, but it does require a champion and it does require follow through. But most importantly, Bryan, I would say it requires care. I think a lot of people say they care about things, but the moment that it gets too hard, it stops. Right. And that's why I use the word champion, because it requires a visionary, it requires someone who can see what is possible without even being there. I remember in a frustrating moment talking to a good friend, and I said, how do we keep the belief and the hope without the confirmation or without the guarantee that we will sort of see that which we are working towards? And he quoted rightfully, he said, Martin Luther King, right? Of course, the famous speech, I have a dream that segregation will be no more. And so there's a really delicate intersection. And again, it doesn't have to be diversity or inclusion. It could be that for what we're aspiring for. But that hope of what is possible keeps us fueled in the present. If we can't hope for what's possible, we very quickly lose sight and lose strength and energy and vibrancy and can actually throw it to the wayside and say, what's it for? And we don't pay it forward. And then we say, that thing is not worth doing. Look, I've been fighting for this thing for 5-10 years. But part of that struggle is believing wholeheartedly that it is possible.
Priscilla, I'm so appreciative that you came on. Listening to you, it's like listening to a great storyteller. I find you very inspiring. We haven't had a lot of time to talk, but what you just said right now kind of just tugged at my heartstrings. Being a queer Latino, coming from an immigrant family like yourself, and to see where you are, you have a few more years on me than my career. I've been here 9-10 years, but to hear your success story, the bottom line, the vision, believing in yourself, that is so important. And I'm so happy that you're able to use your voice to share this with people on this podcast. I think it is so important. So thank you so much. You really are inspiring, and I hope that sits with you. I don't know if anyone has said that to you. I'm sure you hear it a lot, but I'm glad that you're able to share this here. You talked about equitable access. The two questions I want to end with are, do you think the construction industry is equitable? And can you be your true, authentic self at work?
Is the industry equitable in terms of access? I mean, I want to believe we're all working towards that.
Yeah.
But it requires, again, being able to help educate, and inform people. And I know that can get tiring, but it can also be energizing. Every time I get to be, with a new leader who doesn't know anything about anything, right? Whether it's business in Los Angeles, whether it's the diverse makeup in Los Angeles, the best taco spots in Los Angeles, right? Like it can get tiring to talk and inform people about the same thing. Or it could be energizing and be like, you're looking to me to help inform and create the lens of how you're going to see this through. Oh, I'll take that seat 100%.
Yes.
Let me be that person, right? So I think that, are we where we need to be? No, not yet. I don't think so, but we're also not where we used to be. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm a recipient of that. I'm a recipient of people saying yes to someone who comes from a very non-traditional path. And so I think to get to where we need to be, it does require a continuous effort, education, but also, again, making sure that we're being intentional about the work that we are doing to create that equitable access.
Before we get to the next question with the true authentic self, do you think we'll be in a better spot in 10 years from now?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. If we're talking about diversity and inclusion specifically, I think the dream that every practitioner or anyone who believes in as core values has to hope that there isn't now a person who's actually doing that work with that title. It's just embedded. It's in the fabric of how we operate. I don't want to say it's in the DNA. Everyone says that, right? But it's in the fabric of how we operate as a business. But living out core values, I think, is ultra important. And you ask whether or not I can show up authentically, 100%. And I'm grateful that, I'm grateful to myself that I have given myself the permission to be that, because oftentimes we're not hearing from the business or from leaders within the business, hey, don't be like this, don't be like that. I talked about the Diane, hey, you're cute, don't be too playful, don't be too friendly, don't be too this. So there's always these planes of thoughts that are trying to land in the runway of our minds, right? And how we think about things. But it really is up to us on how we decide what gets to land, what gets to grow roots within us, and how that informs how we show up. I think for me, I have given myself the permission to say, yeah, I'm deserving of not just getting to know, but getting to be known.
Yep.
And so it starts with me. And what I've noticed is I don't wait for people to show up authentically, although I did that once upon a time. But I also know that part of the magic that I get to create the type of space. I get to cultivate the type of space that I wish and aspire for. And so in order for me to do that, that requires me. And so I hope that by showing up the way I am, smart, maybe a little funny, I'm going to use a little bit of slang. I'm not going to use hella big words, but I care. And I hope that comes through, and I'm going to show up authentically.
Oh, it comes through.
And what I hope that does for others is she's showing up as herself. Well, I'll show up as myself too. Hoop earrings and everything, right? And that hopefully that starts to shift and impact the cultures of the spaces we're in.
Absolutely. So I hope everyone who's listening can take this in and show up for themselves today. Priscilla, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you. It was a privilege to speak with you, to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Bryan, thank you. Such a great facilitator. I appreciate the questions. And again, thank you for the opportunity to storytell. I think that this is how we also shift the industry, more storytelling. I think is important. I felt seen, I felt heard today. You leaned in, you were curious about some of the things I said, and what more could I want when I'm sharing some of my vulnerabilities, but also where I come from. And so just thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you to Nick and Casey, MGAC. Awesome.
Yes, thank you. And of course, I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast. I want you to feel comfortable, and I am genuinely interested. I'm not being fake on here. I am being myself, and I want to get to know you. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode of MGAC Inner Voices. Check back next month for our next episode. Happy holidays, everyone.